allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You can start by going around the room and introducing yourselves. I'm Sean Cotton, the President of the Board of Education.
Brandy Pavlik, the Executive Director of Finance and Operations.
Terry Collins, Board Treasurer.
Jeremy Chisholm, Legal Counsel.
Sarah Delgado, Principal of Parcells Middle School.
Roger Hummel, Principal of Brownell.
Ahmed Ismail, Board Vice President. Chris Fenton, Interim Superintendent.
Sarah Dirksey, Principal at Pierce Middle School.
Chris Stanley, Director of Language Technology.
Keith Howell, Director of Teaching and Learning.
Okay, just passing the meeting minutes around and the agenda. I can have a motion to approve the agenda for today.
Motion.
Support.
Support, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Wait till I get the meeting minutes. These are the meeting minutes from our last meeting. Have a motion to approve the meeting minutes for January 8th, 2024.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, we're going to Jeremy Chisholm for a presentation on Collins and Blaha.
All right, thank you. You prefer that I stand or sit?
Group projects. Oh, one housekeeping thing. For all meetings that start at 4 p.m., the management at this building has asked that everybody park on either Morningside or Fairford, both meeting attendees and the public. All right, you're on.
Thank you. All right, I'll stand up just because I feel like I don't have to shout as much that way. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Some of you have met me before. Some of you have worked with me for a year or so now, and some of you, it's my first time getting to meet you. So thank you for that, and thank you for the invitation. I will be happy to take any questions you have, but my understanding of the purpose for which I was asked to come is to represent our firm in relation to your need for assistance with collective bargaining and to speak to our abilities in that area. That's something I'm very happy to do. Our firm, for those that don't know, was founded over 40 years ago by Mr. Collins, who is still in practice as well, Mr. Collins and Blaha. And he actually began the firm as a labor director before he even became Mr. Collins, the attorney as well. So labor has been at the center of our practice for all of those 40 plus years at this point in time. And it's something that I and my partner, Mr. Kava, who I know many of you have met as well, spend a lot of time doing in our professional lives. And so what I'd like to address briefly to your attention in terms of what we believe our unique capacities are in this area is the fact that we work exclusively with schools and colleges across the state of Michigan. Education in Michigan is what we do as our full-time occupation. Though we're not educators, we work with educators, such as some of those of you who are in the room with us today, and with boards of education and elected and appointed boards, depending on whether we're talking K-12 school or the college that we're working in. But a core part of our practice and a lot of what we spend our time on cyclically is sitting at the table with all of the employees that you employ, that you keep on the front lines to manage your schools and to work in the classrooms with your children. And it's something we don't take lightly. You can have anybody who does any kind of basic labor law come in as a hired gun, so to speak, forgive the expression, but come in and sit down and say we're going to try to get a checklist of objectives, and there may be a time and a place for that, and it may be efficient in some circumstances, but what we've decided over the decades, again, I'm about to enter my third decade in practice here, Mr. Collins again and others for over 4 decades now. What we've decided as our firm's approach is that we think it's much better service to you if we develop the relationships and sit side by side with all of you, the people that are on your side of the bargaining table on behalf of the boards, while at the same time, hopefully, over time, developing meaningful relationships with counterparties on the other side of the table. Because at the end of the day, the reason the schools exist is to serve the children in this community and to provide them the opportunity for the education they need so that they can go out and pursue excellence in whatever that's going to look like in their own lives, that they can have an opportunity to achieve excellence. So everybody, whether we're negotiating on the board side of the table, teacher side of the table, or whatever other unit we're working with, the other side of the table, should be always focused on achieving that objective, providing the opportunity for excellence for the students in the community. And so we're devoted to that. And we think that's unique among what law firms in Michigan. For one, most law firms aren't devoted to serving schools. And we are, and so we know the business like nobody else. And most firms also don't spend a lot of time developing those relationships over time, sitting at the table and really digging deep into the soil of your community and finding the best opportunities and the ways to work together to achieve, hopefully, a yes that works for everybody whenever there's a conflict that needs to be resolved through negotiations. So we're happy to do that work. We do that work every day. Mr. Kava and I personally are involved in that on an almost weekly basis somewhere in the state of Michigan. And we're happy to work with you in that way as well. It would be a pleasure to do so. So that, I'm happy to take any questions that you have today. I did not make a PowerPoint. I despise PowerPoint. I do it when I'm forced. Otherwise, you're just going to hear me talk. All right, if there's no questions. I'm here. Let me know.
I just had one quick
Yeah,
question. The
please.
list on page 2 is that's not an all-inclusive list, that's a local.
No, that's a local and current list. Those are places we're actively bargaining right now.
Brandy, one question. How
Yeah.
many districts does Collins and Blaha represent?
Around 40.
Okay.
We have 18 attorneys on staff, and we currently serve about 40 school districts and colleges.
Thank you.
Most of those being located here in the metro region. We have a few a little bit farther along, but most right here in the metro region. Yes?
For negotiations and going into negotiations, will we have the same representative follow through the entire time? Because that's a conflict with them meeting and bargaining somewhere else, so to speak.
I'm not sure if I follow with who being somewhere else.
So the attorney that is going to be working through us through negotiations is going to be the same attorney.
Oh, yes,
in the firm.
probably two. Mr. Cobb and I would be the two that would be most likely to be here. I understand the question. Yes, we firmly believe that with any client relationship, you need to have a continuous point of contact so that somebody you get to know and we know you and you can rely on. We usually try to have our attorneys serve clients in at least pairs though, because then you know two people, and if one of us is sick, then you can call the other one, vice versa. Worst comes to worst, like I said, we have 18 attorneys, 7 of whom bargain all the time. So you'd be able to reach somebody who knows what they're doing, even if Mr. Galvin and I were both sick at the same time. But the reason that we try to tag team that way is so that you have that continuous service if there is ever, a day when somebody's sick. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
No, but
Are there any other questions?
All right.
So, actually, I do.
Yeah, fire away.
So, a lot of times through the negotiation process, you'll have, teams that come together, there'll be sometimes sidebars, there'll sometimes be, situations where, you'll have representation from both sides sitting at the table, other times when it's just the school district. What's your overall philosophy in that approach? Do you feel that there are some times where items need to be negotiated with the full team, other times where, it makes more sense for, the school district and the units that you're bargaining with are meeting separately without representation? How do you manage through that,
Sure.
working with many different school districts?
Sure. It's a very good question. And I would say, without going too far into details of strategy in a public forum.
Right, and that was why I didn't really want to ask the question, but I mean, we're trying to.
Yeah,
Make an
I think I
determination.
can give you a fair and generic enough answer that I don't prejudice anybody's chances at the table. So, and it is a good question. I do believe that there are times when all of those different techniques that you mentioned, from large group meetings to smaller group meetings to even one-on-ones between representatives at times, the so-called sidebar in the hallway, can be effective techniques at different points in a negotiation. That's obviously going to be circumscribed by the, I'm not gonna get all lawyery and way off in the weeds on this, but it's gonna be circumscribed to a certain extent by the directives of the principals for either side of the table. Principals being, in this case, the Board of Education, and on the other side, whatever the membership of the unit is that we happen to be, we'll say teachers because they're the biggest unit, but whatever unit you're bargaining with at any given point in time, the membership are the principals under law, and therefore have the say on whether they're willing to allow their chief bargainer to step out into the hallway or not, and some things like that. So do we use all of those techniques in different circumstances with different clients? Absolutely, and I think that there is a place for all of them. They can all be useful at different times, but we also have to keep in mind how far the board would like us to go in any specific use of one of those techniques, and even if the board says, yeah, do whatever you need to make it work, our counterparty might not be willing to. So it's not something I can force and say, we are going to go to the hallway, so to speak.
And for the suites have the same rates that we currently have.
Yes.
Okay, good. Any other questions?
I have a comment rather than a question. I'd say for better. I had the opportunity to do quite a bit of work with Collins and Blaha this past year, serving as president, and I have to tell you that the work that I should let you leave the room. I don't want your head to get too big.
Right.
But the work that you guys and the work that they've done for us has been excellent as far as the quality of work, the level of detail, and the willingness to be available whenever we needed them. And I thank you guys because you made my life a lot simpler last year, and you did excellent work for us.
I appreciate that. It's always nice to hear that, and that is what we strive to do. You shouldn't have to sweat the details. I mean, you tell us what you're trying to do, and within the shape of the law, try to get it done. That's what a good attorney should do. So I appreciate hearing that. That was always nice.
Okay.
All right, thank you all.
Could I have a motion to approve Collins and Blaha for negotiations with our bargaining units?
So moved.
Have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Vice President Ismail,
Yes.
Treasurer Collins,
Yes.
Executive Director Pavlik,
We are good to vote on this, right?
yes.
Okay. Yes.
Executive Director Stanley,
Yes.
Executive Director Howell,
I'll say yes, but I also want to I will work with any representation that is put forth, towards me from the Board of Education. So I mean, if it's Collins, Blaha, or someone else, we're gonna work with them to make sure that the process is appropriate through our negotiation process. So I'll say yes, but like I said, I would work with anyone.
okay. Deputy Superintendent Bishop,
Yes.
Superintendent Fenton,
Yes, but I'm gonna be gone in 3 days, so I'm not sure how much the vote counts, but.
and I'm a yes, so the motion carries.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to work with you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to information discussion. Dr. Bishop?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Our information discussion tonight is really around us presenting, how we actually have utilized our COVID monies that we've received throughout the district. And we know for a fact that going into this year, that there are budget reductions that have to take place. So we are actually honored today to be able to have our principals. They're adjusting right now to be able to come up, but we have all of our secondary principals. They're going to be, I'll let them research that we're going to do. We got enough space for everybody?
That's why I say the wheels.
It is. So, once again, I just want to thank our secondary principals for being here tonight. The purpose for them being here tonight is really twofold. One is for them to be able to share with us exactly how they and their building have utilized ESSER funding, and they have done some pretty creative things with it, and also what are some of the implications that may take place next year when some of the ESSER funding goes away. For everybody who was here, ESSER funding was one-time monies that we've got over the course of the last several years that we know we're going to go away. So we know that we have budget difficulties and budget reductions need to take place. We're not ignorant to that fact, but we do want to be conscious that the information that we're sharing with you today are just educated guesses. Because when we get to a place where we have to find out exactly what classes students need or what the needs of the school are. Sometimes that puts a ripple in our plan, so therefore the things that we're going to present and the principles we'll talk about today, please take them as just that. They're opportunities for us to look at things even though we haven't loaded the loader, even though we haven't talked about teacher staffing, even though we haven't done a lot of the work that we need to do and we're early on in the process, we're doing the best we can to predict, okay, if these ESSER funding was to go away, here is some of the impact it would have on our bill. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there. Another thing that's important for everyone to be able to know during this process is that we have been heavily involved in collaborating about how we can do things better and more creatively and how we can do it with less. And so we're going to continue to do that. The principals, once again, are here to be able to present, and I know each one of them has a slide that they're going to present on. I would like to ask at this point in time, if you wouldn't mind holding all your questions to the very end. The principals are going to give you a building by building look, and then administration, when I say administration, I mean central administration, are going to field the questions because we have a little bit more insight than the building principals do. Because in this process, only thing they have been consumed with is staffing their building based upon the allocation that we have given them. So I just want to restate that again. We would really appreciate it if the principals could definitely say their pieces on their slide. And then if we can ask the questions at the end, that way we can give you the high overview of what that looks like when either we're going through and making decisions, or some questions you may have about some of the details of the presentation.
Sounds great.
I definitely appreciate that. Keith, can you take it away for us, please?
All right, first slide is always the easiest slide. Welcome.
Let me do that one too, man.
You want to do that first slide?
No, go ahead.
All right, today we're just going to give an overview of the secondary buildings, the budgeting process that has taken place. The purpose today, we want to review the COVID relief funds that were utilized for the secondary building. Today is just about secondary buildings. The purpose of the presentation is to provide that overview of the allocations and expenditures funded by non-recurring COVID relief grant funds. This presentation specifically for the ESSERS 3 and the ESSERS 11T dollars that were used during the 23-24 school year at Brownell, Parcells, Pierce, Grosse Pointe North, and Grosse Pointe South. This is also an understanding of how we're going to use the information from 23-24 to inform our decisions for 24-25, knowing that we are not going to have those funds available to us. Please note, this is provided for the purpose of budget planning. So this isn't accurate, actual numbers. We're still in the budget planning process, and I'll explain some of that as we go forward through this presentation. So some of the things to understand today, it's a fluid process. Budgets change, they shift, they adjust. This is a process that we're going through. The ESSERS money will be gone. We will no longer have those funds, so we have to plan knowing that those funds aren't going to be available. Something I want everyone to recognize is that future grant allocations and future funds are unknown at this time. So we're still waiting for the state to provide us with our exact allotment per student, but we're also looking at all of these grants right now in our school district that could be coming our way. And we're submitting those grants. We're hopeful that those grants are going to come forward. And if they do, these grants are very prescribed. There's certain things that you have to use the money for. But if we're awarded grants, then I'll work with the building principals. Central office will work with the building principals to identify how we're going to utilize those funds specific to the prescribed grant requirements. So we're still unknown at that. Sometimes we'll find out in March, sometimes April, sometimes May. Last year we submitted a grant that we didn't find out until September of this year. So I mean, grants come in and we don't get notified right away on the allotment of those funds. The other item that we need to understand is enrollment projections and identified student course selections are in the place of being identified now. They are not finalized until the spring. So it's very difficult to budget for a building and course selections that aren't kind of put forth to the administrators at this time. So we need to wait until those course selections come up to really help with that staffing process. And again, this is for the purpose of budget planning. I'm going to say that on the next slide too, so that we know that this is just a fluid process. We want to look forward. So there are lots of decisions that have been made in the past, and there are lots of decisions that are made now, but we want to look forward to how we're going to make decisions for the 24-25 school year and this budget that's coming up this year. A collaborative decision-making process, we want to make sure we're involving everyone. That's why we're here today. That's why we have individual meetings on a regular basis with our building administration. So we want to make sure that process is collaborative. It has to be adaptable and flexible. knowing that if we get grants that come in, that might offset some of the costs that we're talking about, some of the reductions today, if that grant kind of fits with the requirements of what those reductions are. So we have to be adaptable and know that we can adapt as time goes on. The other piece that I think is crucially important is we have to foster empathy and open communication during uncertain times. Anytime we take a look at making a reduction, a lot of times that means, if it's a big reduction, it means staffing. So knowing that we're going to be taking a look at different staffing items, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today, knowing that we have to foster that empathy and open communication, and hopefully we'll be able to offset some of these costs, determine what's most important to our school district, and plan accordingly. You've all seen this slide before. I've adjusted it a little bit. On the 13th of November, we went through this and we identified kind of the deficit that we would have if we did not have these reoccurring ESSERS 3 and 11T dollars. So as you see, 2023-24, the starting amount, which is remaining monies that we had in the grant. In ESSERS 3, we have about 1.4 million. In ESSERS 11T, we had 2.1 million. In 31.0, 31N6, we had 700,000. And as you see, on the 13th of November, we kind of gave you the amounts of what was paid for with general funds prior to receiving the grant, what types of things were paid for because of the grant, and what that looked like. Because budgets are fluid, things happened over the last month. So on the 3rd of December, we reallocated and identified where those funding amounts are now. If we were to re-establish what they look like today, they might be even a little bit different. But as you can see, the yellow highlighted number at the bottom on the right-hand side on the 3rd is very similar to the number that was on the 13th of November. So that number, the main number hasn't really changed much of what the remaining dollars would be to continue on. Today, we're talking about approximately $1.8 million worth of ESSERS 3 and 11T funds. That is specifically just to secondary buildings. So this presentation is just for those secondary buildings. It doesn't account for the 31.0, 31N6, the elementary, our After Points program, or Summer Points program, or any indirect costs. So the only thing we're talking about today is about $1.8 million of the funding at the secondary buildings. So this slide is the slide that will try to explain how grant money works. So on the left-hand side, this column, it says ESSERS 3 and 11T combined. So this is the amount of money that was pulled from the grant from each one of these secondary buildings. And it comes out to $1.8 million approximately. The FTE that was allocated, and this is information that was given to the building principals. So building principals were told, you have this many FTE. It equates to all these buildings about 14.7 worth of FTE. It was also identified to the building principals, please try not to spend all your allocated FTE because we're in this budget reduction. This was last year, and we're looking at ways to make sure that we're saving as much money as possible. But at the same time, we needed to spend all the awarded grant money that is put forth to us. So the one interesting thing about grant money is when you get a bulk of money in the early stages, it's easier to maintain how you spend that money. So let's say you gave the same FTE allotment out, but you had a big pile of funds, and you used all the allocated amount, but you're still going to have money left. Now we're at the end of the grant cycle, where we have to zero out and get to a zero budget. And a lot of times what happens is that we have FTE where staff members are not making the same amount of money per each one of those FTE or portions of the FTE. So what we need to do as an administrative group is take a look at how we're going to formulate our budgets based on the funds that are awarded to us, knowing that there's a variation of our full-time equivalents or the full-time teacher equivalent, so that we make sure that we're zeroing out that budget at the end of the day. So we're forced to kind of massage the budget so that we use maybe different FTE that was allocated. And the reason we had to do that is because we want to make sure we are exhausting all the funds that were provided to us. So we have to be creative sometimes in how we do that, making sure we're account to the grant requirements, but also getting to that $0 budget. So on the right-hand side, we see what was allocated and then what was used per each building. So you can kind of see a little bit of the discrepancy there, but at the bottom, the total, the 14.7 that was allocated, and we used about 12.1 that per all of the buildings. That includes 2 paras and some additional timesheet work that was done as well. Please note that during the staffing process last year, some of our buildings strategically did not use all their fund allocation, knowing that we were going to be at this space today, that we were going to have to make reductions. And then some of our buildings strategically did the opposite. They used their full amount, knowing that we're going to be in this place today, and knowing that they were going to have to plan for that accordingly. And again, this information is still for budget planning purposes. Anytime you are managing such a large amount of money and many FTEs, that when we look at this 1.6 FTE, that's not 1.6 people. That could be a combination of 10 people that make up 1.6 worth of that FTE. So just helping people understand that. All right, so now we're going to get to our building pieces, and Mr. Humwood,
Thank
take
you,
it away.
Director Howell. I'm up first because it's alphabetical. So, at Brownell, we use our full allotment of FTE for the column on the left where it says 2023-24. We basically use the FTE to fund courses such as academic assistance, math foundations, that would be courses we would typically run in a school year, but we put it back into reducing class size for across our buildings, so it worked out really, really well. One of our wish list types of things was we had worked several years with our co-teaching with English language arts and social studies, and that was something that we have as a goal to bolster a lot of our reading and writing and content areas, so this is something that we continue to fund. So we continue to do that. So looking futuristically for 24-25, what would the impact be? It would be some increased class sizes. It would reduce our intervention course offerings. We're still going to run those, but maybe not in the way that we did. Could have some larger academic assistance type of class sizes, and we would eliminate the co-teaching piece. So that's all.
Similarly, at yourselves, you'll see a lot of the information mirrors each other because the buildings did work collaboratively together to discuss many of these options. And you can see over on the left side, we also, similar to Brownell, utilize some of the FTE to have reduction in class size. We specifically at Parcells focused on English and math to reduce class sizes, so we were able to offer more sections of English and math to our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders so that they had smaller class sizes in those content areas. In terms of support classes, similar to Brownell, we looked at academic assistance. We also included reading foundations and math foundations. Co-teaching opportunities were presented in ELA and social studies. Those are kind of the areas that might need a bit more support for reading and writing, and so we do have some teachers that will push into our English and social studies classes. We were careful about scheduling students into those classes that might need a bit more support so that they would have the co-teaching model to provide that support. And then finally, the Academic Learning Center, which is something that's very specific to Parcells, and that's where we have a behavior coach that works with our students that might have more tier 2 and tier 3 behavioral needs. And so moving forward to next year, again, we would be looking to increase some of those class sizes that we were able to use the FTE for reduction. A reduction in some of our intervention class offerings, again, similar to what Mr. Helmuth said, still continue to offer our intervention classes, but they might need to look a little bit different. And then finally, to reduce those co-teaching opportunities that we were able to use the FTE to provide.
All right, ourselves, so you're gonna kind of hear a similar presentation. We really did work together. We have a lot of the same types of interventions across the different middle schools. For this year, we believe that the biggest impact for our students at Pierce to cover all students was to be able to reduce class sizes. So we focused on when we reduced class sizes, we did that in our core content areas, so math, English, science, and social studies. And then when we reduced the do that by adding sections of those courses. And then we also provided more targeted intervention to students, and then we did that in a way of doing academic assistance, so helping students with their work completion, their executive functioning, just kind of being smart middle school students and learning how to navigate that. Then here's something that we did different from the others. We all kind of did couple little things here differently. We focused on literacy intervention, and we targeted and used support to get off the ground our Lexia program, which is a research-based program to try to support literacy and close the gaps across students. So all of our students participated in that, and they had support by a person, both staff and students for that. And so what happens then, essentially those all kind of get pulled back a little bit, and so our class sizes obviously will remain within the parameters, but yet they will not be buffered with additional sections. And we may reduce our interventions. We've always run academic assistance, but we may not be able to run as many as we are offering this year. And we will likely lose some of that intervention, if not completely, for the literacy support.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, at North, we did follow the directive from central office to the building principals to use as little ESSERs as possible while still supporting student success. So we use that to fund our Dean of Culture, portion of our academic and behavior interventionists, and some time-intensive interventions as well. So if that money were to go away, and the 24-25 planning assumptions would be that class sizes will increase, there will be a reduction of intensive interventions. And then just to share again that North was fully aware of impending budget cuts and refrained from fully using the available funds at the instruction of district administration. And as a result of that, some of what you've seen on the right side for the other buildings actually happened at North this year. So in 23-24, we have already class size increased, co-teaching was eliminated, support classes were eliminated. So as directed, we used a minimal amount of ESSERs for funding in the 23-24 school year to eliminate the need for funding decreases for the 24-25 school year.
We have to go last, so I'll probably echo a lot of what you heard. So one of the things that we did is we did reduce our class sizes and opened up new sections, specifically in our higher frequency failure rate areas, which typically tend to be math, English, and some of our science courses. We also had a laser focus on our current juniors. So they've matriculated, they began in 8th grade. They were the cohort that had 8th grade online completely. We found a lot of gaps with them. So a lot of sections that we've opened over the years have been targeted with that cohort. We've opened up some literacy interventions using Lexia, worked with Keith on that. We've put in some math interventions, and then we bolstered our academic interventions this year and opened up some additional sections specifically to help students who were not meeting the college readiness benchmark for our juniors. So some of our assumptions going into next year, our class size will increase. That'll be specific to our core academic areas. To maintain our electives, we will increase math, science, English, and social studies. We will have a reduction in the number of support and intervention classes. They won't be eliminated, we just might not have as many. And the specific ones that would go away would be some of those targeted interventions at our current juniors. Those classes would be going away. And we did use all of our dollars. We knew that we had some impending layoffs, and so we planned ahead and maintained our staff as we move forward.
Thank you, Lisa. I would also like to just add, first, thank you to the building administrators to sharing the information. We are still in the process of looking for grants to help offset some of the costs of some of these reductions. And just know that the grants from ESSERS 3, 11T was very prescribed for the students that could access that. ESSERS 3 was pretty wide open and how you could use those funds. These new grants coming forth, they're very prescribed, and they have a specific target of either student or specific intervention, either in literacy or math. And we're looking at these specific grants, trying to get them approved. Once they're approved, I'll be working with the building principals and how we're going to allocate those funds, and maybe we'll be able to offset some of the costs of the reductions that are taking place here. So
There's
We're
an
still in
error.
hope.
Mine says impending layoffs of impending retirements.
Yes.
We have some
that's it.
retirements coming
Typo.
up, so we utilize some of them. Shouldn't say that.
So, just so everyone knows, that we're still looking at grants, and we're hopeful that those grants are gonna come through. So, Dr. Bishop?
Yeah, once again, thanks to our principals. I know talking about reductions of any sort is not an easy task to be able to do. But we as administration, we do feel and do understand that reductions are necessary to be able to continue to have a balanced budget. Keith started off the meeting by saying the past is the past. We're not looking to go back or to rehash any of the conversations that, unfortunately took place. And some of them, through our community's lens, were negative. So we're not looking to rehash some of those things. We are looking to move forward and build that new trajectory together. We want to go through the budget reduction process as humanistic as possible. We don't want to talk about people. We want to talk about positions. And unfortunately, within our district, because 90% of the money in which we spend is based around people, unfortunately, that does get to people being part of those reductions. So that's the unfortunate part of the budget reduction process. We want the process to be collaborative as possible. We want to collaborate, with our community, with our principals that are here today, and even the ones that are not here, and even our Board of Education. We want to make sure we have one vision moving forward so that we don't cause any more harm to anybody through having perspectives that do not align. This process is layered. So when we talk about the budget reduction process or how money was spent, who said what, all of those things lead to a very layered process. And because it's so layered, this is going to be our work for the rest of the year. I'm going to take a second to pause. I want everyone to understand. We are going to be working tirelessly over the rest of the year to see how we can do these reductions the most appropriate way possible. So when we talk about layered, this is layered into our staff layoffs, into reductions, into retirements, into a lot of different things at the building level. So we want to go through this the right way, and that's going to take time. Once again, thank you to our admin team. This was not an easy task to be able to come in front of our community to talk about, what we've done in the past and where we see as far as future implications for the money going away. But we thank you for being here today and being able to share your perspective. And at this time, if there's anybody who has any questions of any sort, we would definitely take time to be able to answer those at this time.
I have one. What were some examples of the co-teaching? I think especially at Brownell and.
Yeah, so, as I said, in social studies and English language arts, we really wanted to bolster our ability to collaborate amongst staff. So we would use like a department chair, and that department chair would co-teach maybe the social studies class, or the social studies department chair would co-teach with the ELA course. And so typically you're talking about maybe 1 hour, one or 0.2 FTE as it would be out there.
I'm glad you actually talked a little bit about that, Roger, about co-teaching. So there's 2 co-teaching models that we have throughout the district. One is general education and one is special education. And I want everyone to hear us, especially everybody in the back. We are not looking at reducing or eliminating co-teaching opportunities in special education. The ones on here that we're talking about right now currently are all general education co-teaching opportunities where we've been taking 2 teachers, putting them in the room and being intentional. So anybody who leaves this room, I would like you to take that message out there that is not special education, co-teaching opportunities that we're looking to take away. I want that to be clear. Any other questions? Yes.
What date are the classes you're running actually determined? Is there a certain cutoff date by which you say, okay, we got the student sign up, and now this is what we're doing?
Usually around March or April, we like to be able to have that process. I know even last year we moved it back a little bit further because we were going through and kind of looking at those things. And principals feel free to nod your head or say no or throw anything at me if I'm wrong. But we can usually have it around that time. That helps us to be able to staff accordingly. But we know going through the budget reduction process, sometimes that process is delayed just a little bit. But we would like to have them around March or April.
Is there an optimal date for you?
I'll have to talk to the principals about that. I don't know what the ultimate date is. I mean, if you ask them, they'll say probably tomorrow. But I don't think that's going to be feasible for them. So we got to think about what that optimal date is, and also think about what's doable based upon the conversations. And quite frankly, going through last year, we had a lot of conversations. We still need to continue to have a lot of conversations, and those are going to take time.
The only other question I have is for Keith. Is I know you've got these grants that you're working on, all these different grants. Is there some master list you have of these? It's like this grant can be used for this, and
There is.
potentially we're gonna have this amount of money.
There is. I'm putting it all together into a presentation that I can share with you. It's just not ready.
Okay.
I know you've asked before. I just don't have it ready yet.
Okay.
When he does put it together, be prepared for 3 hours.
It's
Because that many grants
It's a
that
lot.
he's
a lot.
working on.
a lot to absorb on now. It's just I gotta put my head around it. Thank you.
Back to slide like, I don't know, 2 or 3 where you're identifying the heads. So the ones that, can I assume that anything that's not, I think it was going forward. Anything that's not identified as a, so the first number is the total, right? And the second in the last column, the first number is the total and the second is where you're identifying if they were a paraprofessional or other, not a teacher. That, how do you look at it? Okay.
So when building principals had their allotment, they were given the numbers that are right here. That same process took place the year before, and that number was easier to manage because we had a big pot of money that we were pulling from. Now we're at the end of the grant cycle, we have to budget to a zero balance. So to be able to say, here's your number, and then be able to have an exact amount based on salary and benefits and how you're pulling from the grant to exhaust to a zero balance, it just doesn't match out that way. So we have to do some math to make sure that we get to a zero balance and identify individuals that are within the grant requirements as well. So it's a very skillful and long process that Brandy and myself have been working on.
So in the third column, were those.
This column?
Yeah, that column. Were those heads or FT allocated, were they all given the same value regardless of, did you use like a teacher salary value versus a para value?
No, they were given a number or an amount, or not a number, they were given this amount, 1.6 or 3.0 or.
No, I know, but I mean, is, for the 14.7 total heads, were they assumed to be at whatever the fully loaded cost of a teacher is for a year, as opposed to the fully loaded cost of a paraprofessional or?
I don't have the context of that information. I mean, I'm interpreting something that was done through a budget process last year.
Okay.
But I would say that they were using kind of the estimated FTE, which would be the average amount for the school district. So when you're taking a look at those numbers, I would say, especially when 1.6 might really equate to 10 different people. So a 0.2 of one person is different than a 0.2 of another. I think they used an average amount, knowing that they were going to have to get to this zero balance. And Brandy and I just kind of looked at it and identified the right people that would fit that to get to that zero balance. And then the remaining, if those people still work, that are still working, it would just come from the general fund or other grants that are reoccurring grants. Hope that answered your question.
That's more or less. Good.
Any other questions on that?
I just have a comment to thank everybody for putting this together. It was very thorough, and I think this is a very good, collaborative process. If you go back to the last slide. The one before. Yeah, I think this is a great, almost putting it together mission statement for the budgeting process that I think will really work well, and I think should be almost the mission statement of this district budget committee.
Well, we thank you for that presentation. I know we had, for the information discussion, we had 4.1, 4.2, 4.3. That's actually my fault. That probably all could have been in one bullet. So it's not like we have other things to be able to present at this time, but this is the presentation we want to be able to go through to hit all those bullet points. And that's all we have to mention. Yes.
What's the next step?
The next step in this process? Well, the next step in this process is we have to continue to have conversations about what does it look like in our district as far as what are our immediate needs, what are some things we need to do creatively, and then we need to get some more meeting dates on the calendar to be able to get to the point where we can have more meetings like this to be able to talk about it. So that's our immediate next step.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I know that some of the grant opportunities are very prescribed, some may not be, but I would hope we go through the process between now and the time that those are available, or we know what they are. And take a look at those things that are being reduced and identify, like a hierarchy of what's most important, right? If there's dollars that are not so prescribed, which of those things are most important to keep by the plan around that?
That's one of the things we did look at a little bit, last year, we can do it more, so, when, Vice President Ismail said what our next steps are, it's collaboration too.
Okay, public comment. Are there any public comments?
Good afternoon, Lakeitria Felder, district parent, 2 children in kindergarten, 5th and 8th grade. So I'm very interested in hearing about the budget proposal and what's expected. My question is about the motion that was passed. Is that a motion to make a recommendation for the full board to vote on using Collins and Blaha as negotiating counsel? Or a vote to actually use them? That wasn't clear.
Is that it?
That's my question. It wasn't clear in the motion.
This is a public comment, so not a question and answer.
Well, then my comment is that I believe that's appropriate for the full Board of Education to vote on any changes to the use of counsel, given the fact that Collins and Blaha was retained with a limited scope and limited budget. So I would expect that the full board would be voting on the use of counsel on any issues. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Committee member comments?
I'll start.
Yes. Mr. Collins.
Again, thank you for everyone who put this together. I think it hopefully will help to identify the areas of concern, of things that, will, unless we identify other sources of revenue that will have to be reduced. Clearly, nobody wants to reduce the amount of support we can provide our students, but we are faced with dollars that were never intended to be continued on past the end of COVID. And because those dollars won't be there next year, we have to plan accordingly. Planning now and not in April and May and June is the time to do it, not having these discussions later is only more painful than it is before. We need to understand where we're going to be and to be able to provide that budget to the full board in June. That's taking into consideration the amount of dollars that if there is going to be an increase in fund equity next year, or foundation allowance next year, which we really have no idea of yet, right? We have to plan a zero increase in foundation allowance at this point, and we have to at least maintain a balanced budget, or if we're not maintaining a balanced budget, understanding that those things that we're going and dipping into fund equity have a significant impact, or will, if we don't do it, will have a significant impact on our students. So I think I appreciate everyone's time and energy in putting this together, and I look forward to the work over the next several months. So thank you.
I just want to thank everybody for the efforts they put forward to getting us where we are now. And based on going through this, I remember, Chris, you go back to the 04, 05 days and 06, 07 days where we had some substantial cuts. None of this is fun for anybody. And we have to work together and do what's best for the kids. And I think getting these numbers identified now and approaching the budget process with the concept that we need to budget for what we know we're going to have for money and come up with a list. I think Terry sort of alluded to it, of these are our add backs if we get money coming in, and this can go with this grant, like you were talking about, Keith, and defining that list ahead of time before we even get that money, I think is going to be critical from a
timing standpoint, and I appreciate all the work you're putting into these, getting these grants together, Keith. It's quite impressive, actually, and we'll get it done. We'll get it done. I appreciate everybody's help in getting us there.
Anyone else? So thank the principals, yes, Mr.
I
Howell.
just want to thank us for having this conversation earlier. I mean, I know we're sometimes in a vacuum. I might be the only principal who doesn't live in Grosse Pointe. Anyone not live in Grosse Pointe? I'm the only one. And so, you know, in my hometown, this is happening. You talk to principals on our consortium that we're a part of. Everyone's losing this money. And I think every district is faced with the same difficult conversations. So appreciate everyone for having them, and it's not unique to us. It's good to keep that in mind.
Okay. That we are adjourned.
Thank you.